Irfan. Hi, Natalie. Hi, Stefano. And Steven. And Tara. All
Hi,
right.
Isha.
How are you?
Very good. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a nice, robust chat. If you want, you can share where you're calling in from in the world, and if you're brave, what time it is where you are. It can't be an early time for Satish. Oh, Dubai, Italy. Wow.
Very cool.
Nice. Luke calling in from the tender headquarters. Portugal, that's a reasonable time. Hi, Sarah and Carlos. All right, I think we'll get started at 05, just as a heads up. Yeah, Satish, we were wondering if you were 30 minutes different time zone from us. Albuquerque, cool. LA. Oh, hi, Mona. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Isha. Nice to see you again.
Hawaii. Nice to see you, Sean. Are you going to be in Edmonton for Christmas?
Yes, I am. I'll back to you also just to see if are you there right now or
Yeah, yes. Please message me.
perfect. Your background's different, so I guess you changed rooms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm there from the 21st to the 11th thereabouts. So
Okay, awesome. That's great.
perfect.
Hi, Max. I think I saw Matt Levine join too. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Awesome. Great. So, we're just about a minute out. I think I'm going to start by actually asking the team to introduce themselves. So, New Harvest team members can get warmed up in a minute. And then we'll get things started. White Rock, BC, cool. Okay, we're here at 9:05. All right, so thank you so much for showing up to the year in review. I'm really excited to share what New Harvest has been up to for the past year and kind of the change that we've been going through and how we've accommodated kind of a very tough fundraising environment. So we're going to talk about all of that stuff. It's not just going to be the impact work we're doing, but also some of the work we're doing to transition as an organization. But before I get into that, I would love to introduce you to the team that makes all of this possible. Unfortunately, one member of the team is not here today, Dwayne. He's not feeling too well. But we'll start with Paige, who is the COO. And Paige, I'll let you say a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then pass it on to another team member.
Sure. I'm Paige. I am based outside of LA. As Isha said, I'm COO. I've been here for about 3.5 years, and I kind of just do a little bit of everything, but a lot of the stuff internally to the organization. And I will pass it to Jadira.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Jadira, and I'm one of the directors of Responsible Research and Innovation. And I'm based in Ontario, Canada, although currently I'm in Mexico. And I'm really excited to be here and see a lot of the people of the network that we're building. And I'm leading all the work in Canada, so I'm happy to be here. And I'll pass it out to Bree.
Hi, I'm Bree. I am our U.S. Director of Responsible Research and Innovation. So I run our U.S. programs as well as I run all of our research grants. So that includes the New Harvest Fellowship and other grants that we get. And I will pass it on to Simon.
Hi everyone, I am Simon and I am the financial controller handling everything financial. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. So we are going to allow people to ask questions during the presentation, but we would prefer if you use the Q&A feature rather than the chat. So to access the Q&A feature at the bottom right corner, you should see three little shapes, a triangle on top, a square, and a circle. If you click on that, you should see breakout rooms, polls, Q&A, whiteboarding. Click the Q&A, and that's where you can ask questions, and you can also upvote questions as well. The team, especially Paige, is going to be monitoring the Q&A, so if any questions come up that are really relevant to interrupt the presentation, we will do that. Yes, thank you for the test. That worked out really well. So please keep your questions there, and thank you to Bree for posting some instructions on how to get to the Q&A in the chat, just to make sure we're not having questions in two different channels. All right, and if you have any questions about the questions, you can say in the chat, but otherwise let's keep the questions on the presentation in the Q&A section. All right, let's get started. So New Harvest, I'm sure everyone on this call knows this, but New Harvest is a global donor-funded nonprofit organization. We've been around since 2003. And a couple of years ago, we restated our mission. Our mission now is to maximize the positive impacts of cellular agriculture. And we restated it because we felt it was very important to acknowledge that cellular agriculture, or technology in general, has no kind of innate mission. It's actually how we advance the technology and how we move it forward that leads to the type of impact that it has. And so we really want to focus on those positive impacts, which is better for animals, better for the environment, better for people and public health, and minimize some of the negative impacts that could come from introducing technology into our food system. So we do this work by supporting and conducting groundbreaking open research with that very strong emphasis on open. We guide the development and governance of cellular agriculture through our policy engagement, but also through some of our research work as well. We aim to break down silos between disciplines and sectors, which is really important for cellular agriculture. We find time and time again that cell ag kind of has no natural home. Sometimes it's an ag, sometimes it's a biomedical kind of world. We try to make sure that the things that make cell ag work together. And last but not least, we provide leading expertise in identifying and addressing neglected issues. So very key to New Harvest work is intelligence, understanding what is going on in the field and working towards projects that can really fill in the gaps that we see on the ground. All right, next slide. So 18 months ago, I'm taking us into more than a year back because it was a very big transition point for us. 18 months ago in June 2022, we called our emergency town hall. I'm sure several of you on the call were there or were at least aware of it. Because we saw our runway dwindling, we were worried that by October we wouldn't have cash in the bank to keep our mission alive and keep going. So we called this emergency town hall. We told everyone our situation and were able to raise $1.3 million on the spot to carry New Harvest forward into the future and keep our work alive. A month later, we realized that this wasn't just about raising money. We couldn't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. We had to change our strategy as well for long-term success. So we launched a new strategy for amplified impact and long-term sustainability, which I'll share on the next slide. So this kind of new harvest, or the transition we were going towards, is for the past, for 2022 and maybe 10-ish years before, New Harvest was entirely philanthropic organization, relying entirely on donations from individuals and some foundations around the world who just believed in cell ag. And what was awesome about that is it gave us kind of maximum flexibility to do whatever we wanted and kind of act as this kind of free agent organization that saw what was happening in the space and tried to focus on those really neglected aspects that would have the kind of biggest impact. But now we were realizing that with the market, how it was looking, the donors that would normally give to us may not have been giving as much or may not have been in a position to give as much. And so we needed to transition away from relying entirely on philanthropy and more towards finding more stable sources of income that were less affected by the market. So kind of huge foundation opportunities, which are not as affected by the market, and then also government funding. So our kind of line is we wanted to leverage our track record and all the work we had done in building the field to pursue these major growth opportunities with billionaire and government funds while using still not running away from philanthropy, but still using the kind of standard philanthropic model to fund the org during the transition. And I could say with utmost confidence, it is still standard philanthropy that funds a lot of the work that we do today and keeps us flexible and keeps us impactful and able to be agile in the face of change. So that is still incredibly important, but we're using that to try and secure these kind of stronger, more stable sources of funding, and also often larger sources of funding down the line. So one thing we did is we separated the organization into 3 different organizations in 3 different regions. So we have New Harvest in the US. I heard my AirPods like make a noise. So if something happens, Paige or Simon signal to me. New Harvest in the US, where Bree is leading. Oh, I think I heard that go out now. 1 second. Okay, can you hear me just normally on the computer? Okay.
Yeah.
So New Harvest US, where Bree is leading, we are running most of our philanthropy-driven grant programs there. We're also participating in some national ecosystem growth with some of the kind of grantees and universities on the ground there. And then New Harvest Canada, where Jadira is leading, we're focusing on building a national ecosystem primarily with government support, but we're finding a lot of the government support is matching funds, so there is definitely a role for philanthropy and industry in that ecosystem work. And then our kind of Dutch organization is being led by Dwayne, and there we're focused on building a European ecosystem with government support. And there it is kind of less of a focus on matching funds, but you definitely work quite closely with a lot of industry partners as well. And some of them are even on this call today. So if there's no questions on that, I'll keep moving forward. So I'm just going to actually break down this statement of leveraging our track record and then looking at what the major growth opportunities are. So our track record is a story of ongoing impact, and I believe it is a story of ongoing impact because we believe in supporting individuals and the work that they do, whatever it may be, rather than just finite projects. And so over the years, we have supported 60 grantees all around the world. I'm so excited to actually just share their names. Often we just share the universities or where they are in the world, but these are the names of all of the grantees who have come through New Harvest. I'm sure many of them are familiar. I'm sure many of you on the call are on this list as well. But these are the people who are going out there, generating very important, critical data for cellular agriculture. Many of them are entering the workforce in cellular agriculture. Some of them are starting companies as well. Some of them are going on to find leadership academic positions as well. And I'm sure there's other types of roles I haven't even listed there. But empowering emerging leaders, especially technical leaders that can fortify and advance cellular agriculture, has been very important to us over the past several years and going forward as well. I wanted to highlight this quote from Ricardo, who I think gives a great sense of that ongoing impact piece I was talking about. So Ricardo says, "The fellowship opened incredible new possibilities both as a researcher at Newcastle University and as an entrepreneur. It inspired me to make new discoveries that can potentially benefit billions for decades to come. It provided me with the drive to secure multiple collaborative government funding awards, the first drops in what I believe will be a very big ocean of public investment in this space. And it enabled me to found a company offering real value to the global cellular agriculture community today. So Ricardo is an example of someone who, through the fellowship, went on to apply for more government funding, has taken a lot of academic kind of leadership in this space as well, running grants and also guests editing journals and so on. And he also has started a company as well. And I could be telling these stories for pretty much everyone on that list, but we don't have time for that. But that could be a cool thing to do one day. But over on the side, Scott is at the University of Bath, or was at the University of Bath with Marianne Ellis. Marianne's lab at the University of Bath won a 12 million Great British Pounds award to start the Cellular Agriculture Manufacturing Hub. Scott works at a company that Marianne founded called Cellular Agriculture Limited. So another great example of someone that's kind of made waves. Scott has also been followed by two other researchers that we support at Marianne's lab. And Jess, for example, has co-founded two companies in cellular agriculture, specifically in cultivated meat over the years. And she helped us with a very important bioreactor project, which I'm going to share a little bit more about later. So 3 great profiles, but many more. And so in kind of funding all of these students, a side effect of that has been creating this global research community. So across 37 institutions in 9 countries, we've kind of planted the seeds for cell ag expertise, or nodes of cell ag expertise, with the hope that a lot of these universities might go on to receive government grants and kind of grow on their own independent of New Harvest support. And that New Harvest is kind of the catalyst for that research node. Another I say side effect, not because we weren't trying to get publications and the kind of global research community on the ground, but it wasn't kind of mandatory. We really wanted to support that individual in the work they were doing. So one thing that came out of supporting these researchers is 60 now peer-reviewed publications that have come out that really represent the basis of the field. I know about 10 years ago, we talked about how cellular agriculture seemed like science fiction because it just wasn't in science. Like there weren't publications about it. You couldn't read about it. You couldn't find out kind of basic things about how it works. And now we have kind of the foundations of the field. We have papers that every researcher in the field should take a look at before they dive in and figure out what their path forward will be. And thank you for the people doing the thumbs up. That's very encouraging because I can't see everyone's face all at once. The other thing we have are the foundations of a new innovation ecosystem. So it's not just about papers, it's also about creating these longer term research centers that are going to continually do research. So there's several there. I know we talk about Tufts a lot. We also have Dr. Laura Domigan's lab in New Zealand won some funding. Of course, the Cultivated Meat Consortium at UC Davis. We have all these researchers winning government grants, and then on the flip side, we have a lot of people from the New Harvest community going on to create startups in this space. And you do need both. You need both to have a healthy ecosystem to move things forward from the lab to the market. And we've created probably 1,500 jobs along the way. And so I usually call these network effects because we're not the only reason that these people start these companies, and we're not the only reason why these researchers receive the grants, but we like to think that our support was catalytic in their journey, because our support often comes very, very early on in their path forward. All right, and so by building the innovation ecosystem, we have enabled grantees to apply for these large government grants. We've de-risked government and academic investment in cell ag research. So I strongly believe that because this ecosystem is out there, it's less hard for government and for universities to feel like they're doing something weird on their own for the first time. They seem like they're part of a movement, and so jumping in is a lot more de-risked. And then, of course, we build this long-term and hopefully kind of investment bubble proof foundations of the field. Um, and that is incredibly important because we are going to need to outlive hype cycles. For those of you who have been following New Harvest for a while, we sent a newsletter out. I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, about hype cycles and how they're not unique to cellular agriculture. They happen with a lot of kind of flashy new technology where there's a lot of investment in the beginning and then the technology can't deliver or can't scale or can't come to fruition in the timeline, often unrealistic timelines that are imposed upon those technologies. And so people start to be like, oh, I don't know about AI anymore. I don't know about this and that anymore. And then those technologies have to still keep moving forward and keep progressing with a lack of investment and so on. And so we kind of need to acknowledge that CELAG is having an interesting inflection point of its own right now. We've seen these two big news stories about really, really well-funded companies in this space who've raised so much money to create cultivated meat. And we also have to acknowledge that maybe that's not the only thing required to make cultivated meat happen. So New Harvest message has always been that cellular agriculture is an ecosystem effort. It is way too big for just one company to make real. It's also much bigger than meat. It's much bigger than a couple meat products. This is a real movement towards a completely new way of doing agriculture. And so therefore, we need a lot of different players in the space to come together to make this happen. And secondly, we have to acknowledge that the existing systems of tech development just aren't sufficient to move cellular agriculture forward. You know, I have journalists and people call me and saying, oh, what do you think about what's going on with these big companies? And I say, you know, we saw this coming because this is the only way you can raise money for technology often. The kind of first opportunity you have to raise the millions and millions of dollars needed to do biomedical style research is much easier found in VC than it is from government, especially in the very, very early days. So in some ways, this is the path that we're seeing is the only path that was possible or that was allowed to move forward. So we have to acknowledge that they just aren't sufficient for mission-driven business. And we're seeing, you know, I saw this quote, I think is from Ryan Bethencourt, where he says that probably 70 to 90% of players in the cultivated meat space will fail in the next year. Let's see what happens. But it's because it's very, very hard work. Think about all of these researchers that we have funded, all 60 of them and all 60 papers, and they are not working, you know, they don't have products on the market. They have scale up working for them right now. So you kind of, the math doesn't always add up, but the hope is that we can basically build systems that will outlive the hype cycle. So what does that look like? So there's a lot of hope out there despite what we're seeing in the private sector. One is all these government grants that are being awarded are very important because they build that kind of stable foundation of the field. They're very long-term focused, and they should not only create kind of the research products that we need, such as, you know, equipment and publications and knowledge. They also will be training people along the way, and it's ideally people who are going to go on to start companies or work in companies or work in the space in a way that is a lot more kind of resilient in the future. We've also seen more government investment or dedicated government funds for the space, which is a lot more appropriate for the kind of timelines that are associated with cellular agriculture. So I'm incredibly hopeful. I think we're in a very important inflection point, almost like a reality check for the field. And I think only good things will come out of it. But we have to kind of acknowledge two things. Because cellular agriculture is an ecosystem effort, collaboration is very key. We have to reimagine what collaboration looks like. And secondly, because we know that the existing systems of tech development, which are largely just VC funded stuff for totally out there technology, or government for usually like kind of boring incremental technology, we need to kind of bring the best of both worlds together and make some new systems for advancing tech with a mission like cellular agriculture. So, how are we going to do this? I like to say I like to present some answered sounding ideas, but I won't say these are the answers. But the things that New Harvest has been working on to emphasize collaboration and new systems are the following. So we've done a lot of collaborative projects, which I'm excited to share, especially bringing together the public and private sides of cellular agriculture. Collaborative projects are not only necessary to kind of remove the prisoner's dilemma and move technology forward, they're also really, really important for regulatory and policy engagement. It's important to have kind of independent technical leadership that can advise some of these groups as we move the tech forward. So my second point, policy engagement. New Harvest has been doing a lot of this in our various regions around the world, and also in some of these large intergovernmental organizations like FAO. I can't share like a ton of detail around it, but it has been really important for us to be talking to policymakers and providing them with real information from the field, real status updates of what's going on the ground with some of these industry, and also proposing some projects that could actually move the field forward in a meaningful way. And then last but not least, we need to propose some new infrastructure projects, like these new systems I'm talking about that can accelerate development. For us, emphasizing open is incredibly crucial. I feel like the technology is almost too pre-competitive for us to protect our little corner of cellular agriculture. And if we can share things openly, we should be able to move the whole field forward quicker. More quickly. It's also incredibly necessary to come up with new infrastructure projects for the type of science that we're doing, which is incredibly expensive. We saw a lot of this stuff happen with biofuels before, and we're kind of seeing it happen with some of the cell ag companies. When you build your own pilot facility, that's like the most expensive experiment that your company has done ever. And you don't know if it's going to work that first time. You don't know if it's going to be optimal that first time. And in fact, I can pretty much say it will not be optimal that first. By definition, it will not be optimized that first time. So that's kind of brings us back to that emphasis on open, is if we can collaboratively work on some of these big infrastructure projects together and work on, for example, facilities that'll allow different companies to work in the same place and kind of improve gradually, I think we can really move the science forward together in the best way possible. So what are some of the collaborative projects that we've done? Well, these are the ones that were completed this year. You may have noticed that a foundational cellular agriculture textbook was just announced. We're excited about it because we had authors from the public and private sector. And we're incredibly excited about it because we're seeing all of these new universities receiving funding, and we hope what follows is university courses to begin training people in cellular agriculture. So hopefully this textbook is, a missing piece of the puzzle to get some more universities around the world starting introductory cellular agriculture courses, so we could begin kind of getting more people focused on the cell ag questions and technical problems in the field. The second project is our phase 2 of the safety initiative. So for those of you who don't remember, phase 1 of the safety initiative we did a couple years ago, we brought together 87 individuals from 50 cultivated meat companies who all laid out the manufacturing process for cultured meat. And the hope was that we could create this kind of resource that represented the entire field's interest that could be used to inform people, especially policymakers and regulators, about how cultured meat was made in a way that was inclusive. Because often it's just the company that can afford to engage policymakers that gets to dictate some of these process things. So we wanted to make that as equitable as possible. That happened a few years ago, and this second piece was bringing together 48 governmental scientists and regulators from 15 different countries to almost kickstart this concept of harmonization amongst the different countries, because what we've found is that the way even meat is defined in one country versus another could be really, really different. So the way you might plot a course for the regulation of cultivated meat products could be really different in one country to another. And so what we didn't want to do is plot a course for cultivated meat in X country, but the way that it is set up in that country makes it really, really hard for Y country to follow or Z country to follow. So this kind of getting together and working on some of the questions related to the regulation of cultivated meat was really important, and to get so many different countries in the same room was awesome. So that was done in collaboration with Vireo advisors, who have been great to work with. And then another project that we had a small role in was this role of CELAG in sustainable, resilient, and just food systems, which was an awesome project because they interviewed people from the public sector and the private sector around cellular agriculture and made recommendations for how a just transition should happen. So I didn't know if I wanted to put this in the infrastructure project section, because in a way they're kind of proposing a new way to move a field forward. But this is a great read for people who are really interested in how do we actually advance mission-driven technology in an equitable way. And I hope that this report also can help us in some of our policy engagement, because it makes some suggestions for maybe policy change we'd like to see outside of regulatory, and maybe more on the side of tech development and kind of engaging the social sciences around technology as well. I'm going to take a pause to check in with Paige about how we feel about the Q&A.
Yeah, no questions yet. People must have some questions, so don't be shy. Feel free to post them.
Okay, sounds good. I will keep going then. So next, I wanted to share some collaborative projects that have been funded and are underway, but were not completed yet this year. So Bree has been working on this AI and CELAG initiative that has been supported by Schmidt Futures, which has been an adventure in partnering with another kind of techie nonprofit, which is AMI, the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. So the idea is we're working on open publication that looks at some of the opportunities for artificial intelligence and machine learning to be useful in cellular agriculture. So excited about that. And if you have any questions about that, Bree is leading that project. We're also doing a project on safety and regulatory requirements for animal-free media. This is a project in the EU that Dwayne is leading on. So we received a grant from, can't remember who it's from, EIT, I think, to look at, so 3D Biotissues is a startup that was actually founded by Ricardo from that slide a few slides ago, and others, and they are working on a media formulation that could be used in cellular agriculture. And so this partnership looks at some of their formulation and how it works, and tries to kind of look at what's going on with the EU and UK regulatory and safety legislation to kind of see like, what does that mean? How does that come together? How could we possibly think about regulation for this in cultivated meat? So excited to share the results of that, I think pretty soon, few months. And then we have another project that we're part of in Canada, which is an omics guided technologies for production of cell cultivated meat. This project brought together 5 academic and 9 industrial partners, led by Ravi Salvanagapathy. I think I pronounced that right. And Jadira is working on that. So if you have any questions about that project, you can direct them to her. But they're looking at several omics processes, so genomic, proteomic, metabolomic. There was another one that I didn't know how to pronounce, so I didn't put it in the slide, to address these various issues related to scaling and commercialization in cultured meat. And I think that's one of the first big grants in Canada for CELAG, so we're really excited about that one. All right, so the next category are these new infrastructure projects, and it's exciting that we get to start that with the book chapter. So Irfan, who is on this call, at least he was in the beginning, helped lead a group of various people from New Harvest and some not from New Harvest on outlining new approaches to infrastructure and cellular agriculture, especially for cultured meat development. One kind of interesting infrastructure challenge we had was publishing the chapter open in a book that was closed. So if you want to read the chapter, you can find it on our website on the blog. The book is available for purchase, and I'm sure we have the information for that on the blog as well. But it kind of lays out some of our visions for what can be done going forward differently. We also launched CellAg Canada. I call this an infrastructure project because we launched it kind of as a more official group that brought together not only companies in the space, so it wasn't just like a trade association or an industry group, but also some academics and university leadership, and also some nonprofits that have been advocating for cellular agriculture in Canada. And so we're excited about that because I hope it presents kind of like a unified voice in Canada. And I think this is the kind of thing that works well in Canada, but we're actually seeing that happen in various countries around the world. So in a very light touch way, that brings me to my third point. We have been supporting some of the local CellAg groups that have been organizing around the world. It's just been really cool to see. For instance, I was at in Portugal with at an event put on by CellAg Portugal. So Sarah and Carlos are here on the call, maybe others too. And it was just awesome to see them organize. I think they also brought industry, academia, and nonprofits together, but also engaging local policymakers about what the case for CellAg is in their country. And we need to see more and more of that. We need to see more of these kind of local manifestations of what CellAg is, because they're going to look very, very different. Even CellAg in the Netherlands versus CellAg Canada. I mean, the Netherlands doesn't have any land left. Like they're incredibly agriculturally productive, but on a very, very small piece of land. Canada, by contrast, has so much land we don't even know what to do with it, and we're thinking about value-added agriculture. So it's interesting how CellAg could manifest in these two different environments, thinking about agriculture differently. And those are just kind of a few case studies for how local CellAg groups could be thinking about how CellAg manifests. And even more exciting is how some of these CellAg groups are actually connecting with one another to see what does CellAg look like globally? How do these pieces all fit together? So I would say pretty much everyone on the team is slightly working on this, but again, a very light touch way. It's not something New Harvest is leading. It's more something where New Harvest is happy to support where useful. Other infrastructure projects, so these ones are all related to our efforts to make things open, which is really, really hard to do. You would think that things, you make a thing and it's kind of open by default, but it often is not, especially if you work in partnership with universities. So the first thing we worked on is the New Harvest Open CellAg repository, which is a place where we wanted to put all of our publications. Of those 60 peer-reviewed publications that have come out of our grant programs, several of them are not open. It's, as a researcher, you always have to kind of play this game of, do we want to go the open route or do we want to go the closed route, which often comes with more merit, or I don't love merit, but impact factor and kind of these factors that can help with your career and often are kind of indicators for academic progress. And so some of the papers that have come out of the grantee program are in this kind of closed system. And so the Open CellAg repository was designed as kind of workaround to make those papers open by working directly with the author. Bree is the expert in all of that. She figured out all of these kind of legal tangled questions about that. So I will put her on the spot if anyone has questions about that. But I also want to kind of advertise this Open CellAg repository because it can accept so much more than just peer-reviewed publications. We could be putting reports, presentations, graphics, and data sets in there without having open access fees needed to be paid. So if any of you out there have things you'd like to put in there, let us know and we'd happily put them in the repository. Secondly, our fellowship. On the surface, it looks like we're giving money to researchers. And on the inside, we are giving money to researchers, but there's a lot of paperwork that comes with that and a lot of kind of what I think are mission-driven contracts and so on between universities and between the fellows that make the fellowship so effective, in my opinion. And over the past year or maybe 2 years, different groups that want to fund research, more on the climate side actually, have come to New Harvest asking, oh, how does your fellowship work? How are you able to get such great results from the people that you have funded? And we said we actually just focus on funding the people, and we also focus on this open source aspect that kind of gets collaboration going as much as possible. A lot of people know that even researchers cannot talk to other researchers about what they're working on for fear of their project getting scooped, which is just too bad for academia. So we decided to open source how our fellowship works, all of the processes and the policies that make the fellowship possible. Bree also put together all of this stuff. So if you have any questions about it, I would follow up with her. But the idea is if anyone else wants to run a fellowship in the world, whether it be in CellAg or something else, we wanted to share the thinking behind it and the kind of practicalities of it, because we think it's a really important thing, and it also kind of changes the infrastructure of funding researchers. The next one is open sourcing our bioreactor design. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier with Jess. Jess kind of kickstarted a lot of this project in collaboration with some engineering students, and then with a group that we work with in Slovenia called IRNAS. So for 6 years, we've been working on this bioreactor project. It turns out to be like technically a bioreactor, but kind of not a bioreactor. It's more of a perfusion system for growing 3D tissues. But we shared the blueprints for it, and we're going to be doing some kind of validation work on it in the coming years. Again, if you have questions about that project, I would direct them to Bree. And then last but not least, a couple days ago, we opened up all of the visual assets that have gone into a lot of our images and diagrams on the New Harvest website. We found that the kind of visual language of cellular agriculture is kind of fraught. I mean, oftentimes we see a lot of images being used that are either real animal meat products with no kind of clarification, or they might be these kind of sciency, scary science images of like meat with a needle in it and all this kind of stuff. Or it's these prototypes from companies where we also don't have a lot of transparency about what we're actually looking at. So we wanted to put together some diagrams that were just, illustrations that could be used to describe some of the processes in cellular agriculture and give them to all of you if it helps you tell your stories in your reports and presentations as well.
And Isha, before we jump in there, we do have a couple questions.
Okay.
First is from Alex Wu, and he is from the food industry and
Mhm.
would like a 2023 definition for cell ag for people outside the field.
That is a great question. Or yes, it's a great question. So the definition that New Harvest always shares is that cellular agriculture is food made from cells. So that could be meat, that could be milk, that could be fungal stuff. It's a pretty broad definition because we wanted to tie these kind of new products like meat, milk, and eggs made from cells to existing products, which may have been, small food ingredients like MSG and so on that are grown in cell cultures already. So I hope that is helpful, Alex.
And one more. Why does it feel like the USA is really lagging behind in governmental grants and support of cell ag? It feels like Canada and Europe are offering more financial support in the form of grants than the US. What can we do to encourage more support from the US?
That is an awesome question. I have an answer, but I would love to pass the mic over to Bree, since Bree is our director in the US, to muse a little bit on that first.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely musing, so
Yes.
we should both answer. But I think one of the major problems here is the kind of industrial ag lobby and being able to bridge that transition, because they are quite powerful in funding decisions in the US. And I think that gets at needing to have more of these conversations across sectors, so that we aren't seen just as a threat to existing animal agriculture, and trying to find places where we can start to have those conversations, which I think will bring down some of those walls. And we've seen some hope. I have had conversations with people from the Calvin's lobby that are not totally hostile, which I think is pretty exciting in the U.S.
Yeah, for sure. Everything Bree said, and I'll also add, I think compared to Canada and Europe, US just has more of a privatized economy. So we saw way more funding go to US based companies from the VC side because kind of that's more of what the economy is like. And I just think that we see less of this kind of publicly funded research in general. I think there's just more of an attitude that tech happens in the private sector. And we kind of have to change that narrative a little bit or change the story a little bit and say, okay, tech also happens in the private sector, but there's a lot of things we can do in the public sector to get things going as well. I also, this is more maybe a question for you, Bree. I always talk about how CELAG has no home, and to some degree, I thought maybe CELAG did have a home when Tufts won the grant from the USC to found this kind of National Institute of Cellular Agriculture. But I don't know if the home feels like the USDA kind of in a solid way. I'm curious if you think that, Bree.
Yeah, and I was going to highlight that too as another challenge, which I think is a challenge globally, is when you look at public funding and grants from governments, there's no category for cellular agriculture. It just doesn't exist.
Right.
So as every academic here probably knows, you have to look for where you can fit into those categories that are usually on something else, actually on biomedical research or on traditional agriculture, and see where you can finagle CELAG into there. And so that's a challenge. And I think in the US, we are finally starting to see that happen, like the USDA grant at Tufts. And so I think the government representatives that are putting out these funds are starting to become more open to this. We're still not seeing those categories, obviously. But I think to get another thing Aisha said is, in the US, I think there's also a sense that this is already happening in industry. And because we have that kind of lopsided funding landscape early on, and it happened first in industry, not in academia, I think it's harder to convince governments to go back and fund the academic side. And that's completely a theory in my mind, but I think that could be another barrier in the US because there is so much VC funding already. Not that that's impossible to overcome, because I think as we start to see institutes like the USDA Institute at Tufts come out, people are starting to see the value of public research to help support the industry. And the US has tons of grants coming out right now on innovation that starts in academia and goes into industry. And I think those bridge grants are going to be an opportunity to tie the two together.
Yeah, that's awesome, Bree. I'll add another thing, which is now Isha's opinion, but I find that a lot of the conversation about CELAG in the US is kind of bundled in this concept of alternative proteins, which brings together plant-based and CELAG in the same package. Whereas I think those things are a little bit more teased apart in Canada and Europe. And so we have seen some evidence of alternative proteins being supported by the US government and some US government grants. The problem is there's not a lot of clarity about how much of that money goes to CELAG and how much of it goes to plant-based. And I tend to think a lot of it steers towards plant-based because it is a lot more closer to market than CELAG. And so I think because plant-based and CELAG are such different technology readiness levels, we actually shouldn't put them in the same pile anymore, and actually should really focus on teasing them apart. And I actually think they kind of do a disservice to each other, because plant-based is an amazing solution and kind of deserves to have it shine in its own way and have its own kind of issues associated with plant-based removed separate of the issues associated with CELAG. Like when people say that the news about Beyond Impossible affect CELAG, it's kind of like too bad, because those are different issues. Like the Impossible, Beyond, and whatever plant-based issues could probably be solved in a shorter, easier timeline than a lot of the stuff associated with CELAG. So I'll put that out there too.
We do have 2 more questions if we have time.
Sure.
Okay. From Kevin Chen. Among the infrastructure or collaborative projects, do you find that one of these stands out in terms of impact? Any surprises in terms of impact, adoption, or lack thereof?
Well, I have my picks, but I don't know if the other team members will pick. Yeah, I have my own choice. I would probably say this Institute of Cell Ag at the U of A, I'm feeling the most excited about, but the impact has not occurred yet. It's more like impact going forward. But I'd love to pass it over to Bree or Shadira if you have opinions. Bree's thinking very hard. I imagine Shadira probably is too, but I'll have to call on one of you.
I think it's hard because the impact of these things are so hard to see initially, which is something New Harvest has always struggled with when we try to look at impact of our work, because we're trying to be that like rising tide that lifts all boats. It's like it takes longer for the impacts to spread and be seen, which makes impact questions really challenging. But I think one of the ones that I think simultaneously most excited about and surprised by like lack of adoption is the safety work, because there is so much going on around this. And I think on a one-on-one setting with these companies or regulators or academic members, they're really see the values of these, but getting any sort of pre-competitive collaboration around this, it just takes so much momentum. So I think it's slow momentum there, and we are doing more work in the coming year to try to accelerate that. And I think that has a lot of opportunity for impact and still needs more of a push.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I will add that impact can be in different areas. So I wouldn't say that one of the projects will have more impact than the other one, because there's still so many gaps that need to be filled out, that these projects can actually provide impact and outcomes, or are going to try to fill those in different ways. So I guess in general, I would say that I consider all of them having certain impact in those different areas where we need more work.
I'll say one reason why I'm excited about this U of A opportunity is because there's a physicality to it that I don't see in our other project. I mean, I would definitely say that the fellowship is impactful, because that's one of the few things that's been running long enough where you can start to see the impact. And I think sharing the fellowship is exciting too. But if we can take some of the doing things differently attitude of the fellowship and how we wanted to work with no NDAs where possible, and focus on open, all this kind of stuff. If we can bring that kind of attitude into a physical space, I think that could be incredibly impactful, especially if Ryan Bethencourt is right and 70 to 90% of companies don't make it through next year. It would be really interesting to have a place for some of those companies to donate some of the stuff that they've been working on, or open source some of the tools that they have developed or cells they have created or things like that. Because I don't think we really have a good place for that yet. And also this institute at the U of A is also on a farm. Like there's research animals there, there's research crops there. So it is kind of this like marriage of ag and biotech in this way that's really, really hard to find in most places in the world. Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. It's fun to do the musing, and not just do the slides. But maybe I'll go back to the slides now, Paige, or was there one more?
There's actually two more right now. Oh, there's actually a bunch more. So I don't know if maybe you want to finish and then we can do the rest at the end, because I know we're nearing the end.
Okay, I will finish because I think we're near the end, and then let's go back to the questions. But thank you so much for the questions. They are very fun to answer. Okay, so yes, this institute project at the U of A. So the Institute of Cellular Agriculture is in this building. As I said, it's on a farm, but they have like large scale bioreactors in there, and it's a very interesting setup in there because it's for food science research, but there's very few kind of Health Canada limitations because it's a research environment. So it can be a very kind of generative, creative place for innovation. there's a really cool update about this. So we announced this institute in December 2022. It came together incredibly quickly. Jadira came to visit Edmonton for a couple days, and literally within 2 days, we pitched on day one to like all these deans and all these government people and so on. Said we wanted to start an institute. By the second day, we were working on the press release with them. By the third day, they were like, "Can you find a professor that?" Or no, can you fund a professor, like the first tenure track professor? I was like, well, what does it cost to fund a tenure track professor? And it was like multiple millions of dollars. And so I said, well, New Harvest doesn't have multiple millions of dollars, but I guess we can go talk to some donors. So we talked to some donors, and then, it was kind of like, okay. And then about a month later, the U of A came back to us and said, the institute idea went viral. We have so much student interest that we are going to just hire a prof. Like, you don't have to find funding for it. So it's so cool to kind of partner with the university and see all this momentum come together. And when you think about it, New Harvest has invested $0. I mean, the time of going there maybe, but we have not put any money into this institute just yet. And so it's very cool to kind of act as this catalyst and inspiration for universities to get involved. We will be working on the professor selection this month. And actually, I found out yesterday when the kind of public sessions are for the professor applicants. So I'll be sending that out in the newsletter. I hope you can attend, like the people on this call can attend some of those sessions, because I'm on the selection committee for picking this professor, and I'd love to hear everyone else's feedback. I'm kind of alone on that selection committee in that I'm the only one who's not also I'm not a professor, but not a professor who's kind of thinking about it from a academic standpoint. I'm thinking of it more from what does CELAG need standpoint. So I'll send those emails out, and I would love for you to be part of those sessions and share your thoughts with me as able. But we're super excited about that. And then, of course, we have a whole bunch of stuff that's super exciting that we just can't talk about yet. So Dwayne has been working on this very large consortium grant, which many of you on the call are affiliated with. We should be hearing an announcement about that in a matter of days, like 3, 4, 5 days. So stay tuned for that. We also have some other major infrastructure projects in the works outside of the university. We're working with some kind of tenured professionals in the scale up space. So we'll keep you posted on how that progresses. We also have a ton of grants in progress and in review right now. I will say a lot of the grants that we apply for, if not all of them, are collaborative. So they pretty much always bring together academia, industry, or multiple academics, multiple industry partners in many cases, to work on aspects of cellular agriculture. So we hope to have some good news on that. And then we also have some engagements with foundations that are underway. So the summary is I think we are doing well on our transition technique of kind of moving towards more large scale foundation and government support. We're still able to do this entirely with philanthropic funding. All of our kind of staff costs are covered by philanthropy still. So like philanthropy is the engine driving New Harvest. But I think we're getting there, and I think we'll be able to launch some pretty big projects in the next few months even, that should make some big progress for cellular agriculture. So some reflections. We need to secure funding before executing projects, and that takes time. So just acknowledging that even in the projects I shared, some of them we completed, some of them we're really excited about, but at the end of the day, we just don't have the flexibility we used to, where we had a big pot of money and said, okay, let's do this, let's do that. Now we have to propose it to different funders and funding agencies, which is just kind of, part of the process. I also will say that protecting New Harvest neutrality over the years has been so incredibly valuable. I think our ability to apply for government grants, and to have such productive policy engagement conversations with governments has been because New Harvest has been so neutral, so academic, and kind of so data oriented all these years. So I'm very proud of us sticking to that all the time. And then last but not least, it's individual donors like you on this call who make this transition possible and secure New Harvest success, and ultimately fund the organization still. Like the we as a team and we as the people on the team are supported by donors like you. And so with that, I wanted to ask you to donate today and share our donation campaign. So our goal is a little more modest today. We want to raise about $1 million by the end of the year. And I'm excited to say that the Consicon Foundation is going to be doing a match with us. So up to $125,000 will be matched by the Consicon Fund if donated from now on. So please consider donating. You can use the QR code up in the corner there, and I think Paige sent the link for the donation page as well. And I think Jeff is on the call. I can't see him, but I hope he's there. Jeff, if you would like to say like a couple words about why you donate to New Harvest and why you want to match donations.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Isha. We're delighted to be able to contribute to the mission. I work for a charitable foundation that funds climate and environment work. And so we're always trying to figure out, kind of what granting opportunities give us the best return on our charitable dollar. And I think in general, funders tend to be risk averse, and they tend to flood money into areas that have already been really de-risked. So like, we want to be investing in solar in 1980, not 2023, right? And so that's not what New Harvest is doing. What they're trying to accomplish isn't incremental. It's, it's audacious, it's challenging, it's difficult, but I think also potentially world changing. So I salute everyone for the support that you've given so far, and I hope you'll join us in continuing to support the mission.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Awesome. Simon has a question.
No, mine is just to thank Jeff for the support and indeed for all that he has done for us over the years, and to invite everyone to join in, because surely the return on investment is high and it's great. And we look forward to working with each one of you.
Thanks, Simon. All right, so we are kind of officially at the end of our slides, so I think we'll just move into back to the questions page.
Yep.
And then also we kind of just open it up if people want to chit chat or other people want to answer the questions too. So it becomes pretty informal from here on out.
All right, so Alex Shirazi and Ahmed Khan had sort of similar ones, so I'm going to kind of lump them together. Alex wants to know, is New Harvest officially working with any lobbyist groups or PACs in the US? And Ahmed thought you made a really good point about separating out alt protein and cell ag, and wondering if we're doing any work to engage government and policymakers in separating them.
Good questions. And of course, anyone on the New Harvest team is ready to chime in. I just can't see all of you, so just come off mute whenever. We aren't officially working with any of the lobbyist groups. We are in touch with them, but New Harvest is really interested in doing policy engagement as opposed to lobbying, which are similar but different, and of course kind of mean different things in different countries. But to us, policy engagement is acting more as like informing policymakers and providing like evidence to guide evidence-based policymaking, and kind of not having a specific agenda that's about advancing a private interest. Whereas lobbyist groups, of course, are advancing an agenda and usually are just industry oriented. So we are kind of in tune with some of these groups and talk to them once in a while, but I wouldn't say that we work with them or are even kind of like collaborating with them on anything official. I don't know, Brie, if you want to build on that at all.
No, I think you said all of it, but I will just add, I guess, that I think that staying away from lobbying as an organization is part of how we've maintained that neutrality that Isha talked about a couple of slides ago, that I do think is really critical for the type of work we want to do, which is, again, more about policy information and informing the field at large, providing data-driven information, and by not engaging in any sort of policy agenda-based lobbying, I think it helps us open some of those doors as a more neutral organization. And I think both are incredibly important. Just we found it really important for the work we want to do to stay very neutral.
Yeah, and then on Ahmed's question about, maybe separating cell ag and plant-based, I don't know if we've like actively done. I think that it's something we talk about, but we've never done it in an active way, and it's like kind of an interesting idea. But I almost want to flip that back to you, Ahmed. Like, how come you decided to focus cell agri just on cell ag and not do the alternative protein thing? If you're willing to share.
Yeah, sure. Hope you can hear me over here. But
yeah.
my perspective has always been I found the technology and the science behind cell agriculture very fascinating, and initially never really considered it to be part of this plant-based alternative protein ecosystem. But over the years, it seems to have been all come together as one. That's why I was asking about that.
Yeah, I think that my trouble with alternative protein is it still, in a way, centers animal agriculture. Because the alternative is everything that isn't animal agriculture, and so it kind of sets you up for a against animal agriculture thing. Whereas I think separating them out contributes more to this idea of like a portfolio approach to protein. And yeah, I don't know. I wonder what an active campaign would look like. That's like just an interesting thing to think about.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, here is another one. Without the New Harvest Conference this year, it seems like New Harvest has been pretty quiet while working on all these incredible projects, not sharing thought leadership on the state of the field. Will that quiet approach continue next year, or will that change?
I don't know. I miss the conference a lot. I feel like we have been sharing the thought leadership still through other conferences. But yeah, they don't have the same visibility to the New Harvest audience as the New Harvest Conference. So maybe one kind of small thing I'm taking away is how can New Harvest share more thought leadership through our other channels? Because I do think we have been doing that, but we could do it better. I don't think we've made a decision on the New Harvest Conference next year, but like all of our projects, we have to secure the funding before we can do them. So, and the conference, we tried to secure the funding before doing it last year, and it just didn't work out. And it was kind of messy and political reasons more than like money reasons, which was really frustrating. So I don't know. I wish I could answer you more specifically, but I don't want us to be quiet. So I'll take that as feedback for New Harvest going forward. But I do want us to focus on stuff that's going to deliver material value. And in a way, there's a lot of noise in cell ag, I've often found, but there's not a lot of physical stuff happening. So if we're heads down getting some of these grants off the ground, I think that is the most important thing we can do this past year and probably most of next year too. But I will say I'm actively looking for opportunities to have the New Harvest Conference in a productive way, especially if we can get some government or local support, because people just love it so much. And I've been to a lot of conferences this year. They just don't tackle the topics, I feel, as directly as the New Harvest Conference does. So thank you, Anonymous. Your point is well taken, and we'll chew on that for our kind of 2024 budget and planning.
Yeah, and I would just chime in and say, I think pretty much every year we've operated the conference at a loss financially because we do try to make tickets affordable. We do give free tickets away to a lot of people because we don't want that to be a barrier to attendance. But sure. I think we want to have it, but we need to break even. We have also considered having a virtual one. I saw John's comment about, having it on YouTube, but it just seems like, these days people are sitting in so many virtual meetings like this one. We don't know if it would really have that same sort of feeling or impact if we were to do one virtually. But we've definitely thought about it, and I would love to hear people's opinions on that. If we can't have one in person, if they would be interested in having something virtual. Okay. Next question from Elon Kalelo, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Any webinars or resources you could point us to for policy advisement that we can use when talking to our local New Mexico representatives and rancher organizations? And is there someone in particular at New Harvest that we should reach out to for help with policy advisement?
I don't know the answer to this question. Very interesting. My next question is, I'm curious about like the New Mexico. Like, what is the kind of pitch for CELAG in New Mexico?
Rural environments. We're not a very high income state, and so there's a lot of need for food. Our mission is to feed or to end famine for mothers and children. That's the market we want to go after for like $1 a meal, $1.50 a meal kind of market, like UN programs, NGOs, things like that. But here in New Mexico, we have a lot of interest in that as well, because we are a very poor state. And so ranchers here are seeing declines in their industry, are looking for new ways to make money. If you could turn one cow into 20, or you could be harvesting platelet lysate before cows go to slaughter. There's monetization opportunities here, and we really focus a lot around using New Mexico products and cells. So like if there was like a ranch, there's interest in the concept of a ranch farmed label kind of thing, where if you use ranch farm cells from New Mexico, then there would be some sort of subsidies available for culture meat companies coming to New Mexico, so attract economic development opportunities exist here, free lab space, things like that, because there are rural areas where there's like labs here out in the desert and no one's using them, so companies could come here and use that lab space for free if they came here and started paying taxes in New Mexico. And so we're finding traction around that, because a lot of people are like, oh, you're killing the ranch industry, and so we've had to engage in those conversations that we're not. There's opportunities for ranchers here, so and they're like one of the larger economies here in New Mexico is agriculture, and the universities here are interested. We also have programs for doing international trade. There's lots of grants for international trade. So yeah, I hope that helps explain the landscape.
Yeah, that does really help. I'm curious, Bree.
Yeah. So I think to answer your question about resources, I think that those types of resources about how to have these conversations and engage with traditional farming communities don't exist. The field likes to talk a lot about how we need to do that, but the kind of toolkit for doing that and best ways to approach it they're not out there. And that's actually something we've talked about trying to do in expanding our fellowship program to beyond the wet lab sciences and into kind of social sciences that ask some of these questions about how to bridge gaps, how to transition this technology into society is something we would really like to do. But maybe we can follow up offline and I can share kind of a variety of resources. There's no one-stop shop for it right now, but I'd love to chat about ways that we can engage. It sounds like a lot of opportunities there.
Yep, certainly. I'll put my email in the chat, and we've gotten a lot of interest from the film industry here as well around doing. I know Alex is on the call, but it seems like they want to talk more about this and get it out in different ways.
Yeah,
cool.
I would just add that as Bree was saying, these resources doesn't exist, but there are several research groups that are working on that type of work and that are really interested in having those conversations. So Happy to follow up also with some of the collaborators that we have. There's a group in UK that is actively working in these kind of projects. So, and they are always willing and open to having conversations with anyone that is interested in this topic. So happy to help make those connections as well.
Yeah, I'll also add, Elon, the pitch that you made just now, I think is like I'm in Edmonton, and I imagine Albuquerque is similar as like a kind of smaller marketplace where you're only separated from any other person by like 2 or 3 people. So I would say like making things possible in these smaller places is so so possible if you have kind of the right pitch behind you, and if you're just like the person that is willing to become the go-to person to talk about these kinds of things. So I would be open also to sharing some of the stuff that we shared with our local like here our local kind of government, and yeah, our local government, in case it's inspirational. I think the case will be completely different because the ag scene is completely different, but it may be inspirational in a different way.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I just want to pay forward what New Harvest is doing and hopefully help you raise money as well.
Thanks. Awesome.
Okay, and we have a question from Mona Zahir. How does New Harvest navigate both the similarities and differences in their visions of cellular agriculture with that of the Good Food Institute? And to what extent are efforts coordinated?
Yes, Mona. I was almost going to talk about GFI when I was talking about the alt protein thing earlier, because I honestly think that's mostly a GFI thing. Like, I think alternative protein came out under this bucket because that's a messaging that GFI, I think, created and then ran with. So we do have similarities and differences. It was really cool when I was in Europe last couple months ago or last month, and I saw Elliot give a talk about what CellAg at Good Food at GFI actually looks like, and it was interesting that it seems the team focused on CellAg there is pretty much the same size as New Harvest team, because it was always a little bit non-transparent to me how much of GFI was focused on plant-based stuff and how much was focused on CellAg stuff. But I think that we're actually kind of similar in terms of our investment in CellAg in terms of people hours. We have some differences. I think they're also a little bit more corporate focused and supportive of kind of corporate paths. I don't see as much messaging about kind of just transition and social science questions either. I'm not saying that everyone has to do everything. It's just more of an acknowledgement of the differences. I think they're really good at policy engagement stuff in this kind of classic lobbying, nonprofit lobbying style of way, and kind of other ways that happen a lot in kind of animal advocacy, like getting people to sign letters and that kind of stuff. They're really awesome at that. On the collaboration front, we have been kind of more connected to some of the folks in Europe, but also, and have worked on and have like begun some projects to work with them. So I think when we think about collaborating with GFI, it's more on a project basis of, okay, what is a specific thing that we can do together, rather than a kind of whole org coordination. I don't even know if that does service to the field to kind of have everyone doing all the same stuff. But I'm also open for advice or thoughts on that from the people on this call. And if anyone else from the New Harvest team wants to chime in, you're welcome to as well. Thanks, Tara. There's some people leaving.
That is all the questions on the Q&A. So I don't know if you just want to open it up for people chatting or just chiming in and asking questions.
Sure. Yeah, so I think officially that's a wrap. So thank you everyone for coming. And if anyone wants to stick around to chit chat, you're welcome to. But otherwise, really appreciate you all being here and your very thoughtful questions, and for being close to New Harvest, most of you for many years. So thank you. Thanks for all the kind words in the chat. I need to change my view. I want to see everybody. Thanks, Satish. I'm not a real doctor. I just have to tell you that. I wonder, is Irfan still on the call? I can't see everybody. I know Irfan's not. Thanks, Carlos. Oh, Rachel's here too. Thanks, Satish.
Is it over?
Yes, it's over.
Oh.
Hi, John.
How are you, John?
I'm good. It's snowing here.
Where are you?
Outside of Chicago in a suburb called Lombard. It's the Lilac Village. That's what we're known for here. Lombardians.
We don't have any snow yet. It's really weird.
It's a light dusting.
Okay. Stefano, where are you in the world? You're in your car?
I'm just out of Rome. I'm going back to my house now. So it was a pleasure to listen to the new information, and I'm very curious about that. Thank you, Isha.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Stefano. And Mona, where are you calling from?
LA.
Oh yeah, right. I saw.
I just wanted to say hello. Hi, Bree. I'm hoping Irfan will get back to the email introduction that you made because I still want to talk to him. For people who don't know, I'm trying to do some kind of survey project of research teams in cellular agriculture. So a short survey to ask about how their funding sources, ask about their funding sources and then what kinds of projects they're working on. But I'm trying to find a way to talk to companies to figure out what kinds of questions would be less sensitive. So yeah, hoping to get some companies to talk to me. We'll see.
Yeah. I think, is it US based or could be anywhere?
Yeah, I'm thinking US based, but honestly, I'm starting to think maybe I could expand it. Really, I just need to figure out what is feasible. I just want to do something that's feasible and get as much participation.
Interesting.
So yeah, I'm gonna follow up with Irfan, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, I think you'll get there. We'll figure out the right balance.
All right. Well, bye guys. Thank you.
All right. Bye, Mona. All right. I think we'll call it a wrap then. So nice to see you both. Bye, Satish. Get to bed.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.